Long Live Your Turtle here. One of my favorite things when I'm doom scrolling on my phone is an advertisement that is super applicable to what brings me happiness. And that is a new canister filter with lots of power and lots of room for media. In today's video, I'm going to be setting up the HW-3000 filter. This is next in the line on the super generic filters, the 304B, the 704B, and now the 3000. In this video, I'm going to do a step-by-step setup, and at the end, let's go over what I think about the giant piece of a filter, the HW-3000. Alright, so one of my favorite things about this filter so far is it showed up in this packaging. I bought it on Amazon. Usually they put it, in an Amazon box or just, a discreet box that you can't tell exactly what it is. But nope, they slapped a label around this bad boy and it showed up at my doorstep. Everyone knew what it was. But this is a bit of a niche product and it's very budget friendly, so I don't think anyone's going door to door trying to find a budget canister filter for their pet turtle tank. But enough about this box. Let's get the filter out. Let's get all the components on the table here, and let's talk about this filter. And I'm also going to compare this filter to its predecessor, or its subordinate, the 704B, which I have operating on my 75-gallon aquarium here on my left. All right, let's take a closer look. All right, before we keep going, check out Harold here. She's like, I see you over there. What are you doing in my tank? What's next? What's this new project you're gonna interrupt my day with? She's hanging out on her favorite little log. Loves that thing. All right, back to the HW-3000. What we have here is the classic green vinyl tubing that comes with these generic type filters. I've used this tubing in the past. It's very sturdy. It's very thick vinyl, and I've never had issues with this tubing itself. It's kind of hard to bend around because it is so sturdy. The color is awful, but I assume they do this either to be extremely original or maybe blend in, but probably because it's cheaper. So classic green tubing there. What we have here is the intake output adapter. It's going to go onto your filter body. And what this does is it basically acts as a valve for your tubes. Then in the middle of the table here, we have everything that can go into your output. You got a little customization here. You can do a spray bar that's pretty long. You got these 3 tubes that can go span a decent chunk of your tank to spread the water out. Or you can just go with the classic, looks like this is a 2-way output, and you got these little nozzles to direct the flow a little bit on where you want it to go in the tank. And then as the manual calls it, you have your inlet curved component. What a name. But this is simply the piece that goes around the trim of your tank to get your tubing from your filter into the components for your output. Now, over here on the right, we have all of our intake components. Now, intakes are typically very simple. They're just a tube with a strainer like this one, pulling water from close to the bottom of your tank. But something really cool about this filter is it actually comes with a surface skimmer, which is something I normally would never use and something that typically doesn't come with a filter. It's usually an add-on or some additional product that you have to buy to get a skimmer like this. But this comes with a filter, which is really cool. Typically don't use it for my turtle tanks, but since it comes with a filter, I'm going to give it a shot. And you have your curved inlet component, just like we did for the output. Now, one thing I thought was very funny in this manual is it calls these suction cups suckers. So we got several suckers to deal with as well. Moving over to the arguably most important component, it is the canister filter itself. And you can see here it's about 11 by 11 by 17 inches, similar to the older designs that we'll compare to later. Up here we have where that adapter goes. You got some little levers that are gonna lock in that adapter. And look at this, we got an LCD screen. That is usually reserved for your fancier filters. We'll go over what that does a little bit later. Let's get to the inside of this canister filter and see what we have going on there. All right, so inside the filter, we got several things going on here. First and foremost, you have 4 of these media trays, and each tray comes with this pretty good filter floss, and this is going to be a great mechanical filter, but it doesn't come with any other kind of filtration. So we're going to have to provide that to the filter to make it a complete filter, and we'll talk about that a little later on. So be careful when you're opening it up, because in the top tray they put a crystal tube, and this is the tube that is going to protect your UV light from water, because obviously you can't have water touching the light bulb, and this will give you a watertight seal. All right, then we have our skep piece, and this goes on top of your top tray, and then obviously your hole here, which is actually going to be where your UV light goes. And then last here, I just want to point out inside the filter itself, look at all this volume. Obviously you got these trays to see the volume, but whew, just look how much filter media we can put in here. And just notice the sticker on the bottom. That basically just says, hey, put your water intake, which is going to be the whole part that goes through each of your trays, line it up with that to guarantee success. We'll talk about that as I assemble everything. All right, so that's all the components to the HW-3000. Obviously there's a decent amount of things going on here, but once you break it down, it's all pretty straightforward. I would say the most components are really around the tubing aspect of the filter, the media baskets, that light. That's all very simple stuff. What I want to do now is I want to start the comparison process to the older filter that this is going to replace. Because if you have the HW-304B or the 704B, which are the larger sizes of the older model of this general canister filter, also known as the 5-stage, 5 stages being 1 stage is going past that UV light, and then 4 media baskets. Those are your 5 stages that we're talking about here. We're going to compare the 304B, the 704B, and the 3000. What makes that really easy is the 304B and the 704B are basically the same filter with very minor tweaks. So what I'm going to do is right now I have 2 704Bs filtering my 75-gallon aquarium here with my radiator slider Herald. And it keeps this tank very clean, and it's definitely a lot more filtration than is required. So I'm going to pull those filters off to hopefully replace it with just this one filter. And what I'm also going to do is steal some of the filter media I put in those filters to go in this one, because like I said, this just comes with filter floss, great mechanical filtration, but definitely not adequate for the nitrogen cycle system that you want to put into our filter itself. Just to show you guys real quick, these are my 2 SUNSUN 704B filters. As you can see, very similar design in general, but we'll go over a couple of key differences. There's their basic intake that I was talking about. Basic outputs, just straight tube there. Intake, Herald. Let's get these things out of here. All right, so before we go any further, I wanted to emphasize the difference in this new HW-3000 model to the older model that is the 704B or even the 304B, because the difference between the 304 and 704B are very, very small. Just a wattage difference and a couple other very minor things. So we'll assume those are kind of the same for this comparison. For our comparison, which one's the new one? Kind of hard to tell, isn't it? Because they're very similar in overall design. This one here is our 3000, that's the new one we're working with today. This one here is a 704B. Just recently uninstalled it from my 75-gallon aquarium. Let's talk about the differences real quick. So you can see here the overall shape of the 704B is a little bit more squarish, kind of got sharper edges on it, as opposed to the 3000, which is a little more rounded. So, I mean, that's not much of a difference there in my opinion. Maybe a little less of these vertical supports here, so I guess they decided those weren't necessary. As far as tubing, so I don't have to hold this anymore, this is from our 704B filter. It's got just a classic straight shaft intake with a strainer on the bottom. It has that intake output adapter piece that goes onto the top of our filter, and that is the exact same really. I mean, there's a slight difference between the two, but as far as the mechanism goes, same principles here. Let me go back real quick. Why am I comparing this again? Well, if you have a 704B or a 304B, maybe you're wondering, should I actually get the 3000 that I'm going to be installing today? Because yeah, it definitely has more power, more gallons per hour, but is it worth it overall, especially if you already have 2 of these bad boys? And second, and very important to people, is the cost. The 3000 costs about $30 more than the 704B and the 304B. And that brings a grand total of $130 for our 3000 and around $100 for the 704 and 304. Not very expensive filters for the power that you get, but price is a big thing. On the other side of our tubing, from the adapter piece that goes into the filter, we have the actual part that bends around the trim of your tank, and these have these kind of adjustable clips that I never really liked. They didn't work that well for bigger tanks like a 75-gallon aquarium because the trim is so big you have to go to like the extreme extents. And comparing the size here, looks like very similar dimensions, but you'll notice way different design. And we'll get into why this design is a little different and how you interact with this design differently from this one. Because with this one, you just have your tubes that go into the back piece here, and then you screw these little clips to the side of your tank so it holds it in place. This one has those screws, but it also has this little cap here, and the actual sealing mechanism to hold your tube on is different from these weird locking rings that never actually worked on the older filter. This one is an actual threaded coupler, so that's going to be a better seal than these, which are doing nothing. Oh, and if you didn't notice, the green tubing is the exact same, like I mentioned before. As far as media baskets go, this is the exact same setup. You have your hole for your UV light, and like I said, this filter floss is all that comes in the 3000, and it's the same thing for the 304 and 704B. Just comes with filter floss. You're gonna have to add your own media to finish off the filtration. All right, so the last thing I want to compare is the tops of our filters. Definitely where we're seeing the biggest differences. And this is the powerhouse of the filter. It has the pump in it. It has the adapter where all your tubes come in. It has your valves so you can disconnect your tubes. As you can see here on the 3000, you have this fancy LCD screen with some control buttons. And on the 704, 304B, you don't get any of that except for this one button, and that's to turn on and off your UV light. So very basic on this filter, but you got your fancy LCD screen. And what this does is you can change the flow rate on your filter. We have turtles, and at least for me, I'm always going full throttle, so I'm not going to be using this feature, but maybe if you had a smaller setup with fish or something, and or you were growing your tanks, and you had a small tank and you didn't want all that flow, sure, you could change the flow rate. What it also does is it has a timer that's built into it so that it tracks 2,000 hours, and then it tells you to replace your UV bulb. And then it also allows you to time how often you want your UV light to be on. So that's a really cool thing about the LCD screen. And like I said, none of that exists on the 704 or 304B. Our adapter part is a little bit different. It actually has two locking mechanisms. It has the center one, just like the 704 and 304B, the center locking mechanism, but it also has two additional locking mechanisms, which is great because there's really two places this filter is going to leak. It's going to be out of your adapter where your tubes are coming in, and you have some seals and O-rings that are going to keep your water from coming out this adapter section, and then also the seal and O-ring around the outside of your cover. Those are your two leaking spots, so I'm glad that they have an extra layer of defense for this adapter piece. We have two blue features. This one does nothing. It just looks cool. This one gives me nightmare flashbacks. This is a priming button. This is the 704, 304. 3000 has nothing. This is a giant priming button that you use to basically try to press water out of your filter to try to prime it to get it started. And the reason I have flashbacks is I remember pounding this thing, pushing it, trying to get my 704, 304B filter primed and having a huge headache doing so. And the awesome thing about the 3000 is it states it's self-priming, and that is Fluval FX6. That's premium filter worthy right there. And that kind of feature, that is essential for filters. I mean, yeah, I could get away with it. It took me way too long, grueling, yelling, swearing, trying to get this filter to be primed. But this one, I'm excited because it's self-priming. They just have two steps where you fill the tubes before you do it. But if this works, it's going to be an awesome feature for this type of filter. So to tack on a few more differences, the 3000 pumps 793 gallons per hour of water, and that includes no filter media. That's just a standard that they use. Like, that's how powerful the pump is. And the 704 and 304B were only 525 gallons per hour. So in my opinion, that's a big difference, especially when it comes to a turtle tank. You want to really increase that flow to get that poopy water going through a lot of filter media. So the more water you can get through there, the more the filter media, that biological media, will be able to chomp away, turn that ammonia into nitrite, and then nitrite into nitrate. Another difference, if you care about your energy consumption, is the 304B is 55 watts, the 704B is 45 watts, and our 3000 is only 30 watts. So looking at your energy bill, my 704B cost me about $4.20 to run over a month, and this 3000 should only cost me around $2.30. So I'm saving about $2 using this filter instead of that one. Doesn't sound like much, but I had 2 of these 704Bs. Hopefully I will only need this one 3000, which will save me, what, $4? That's a coffee at Dunkin's. And that's about it as far as comparisons go and just overview of the mechanics of this filter. They're very similar other than a couple, I would say, upgrades. If I want to compare the filters, I would really go with the 3000 being like your highest trim level on your economy car. And the 704B is the middle and the 304B is your lowest. But I can hear Harold getting impatient over here. She wants some moving water right now. She's just living in this black water, still water situation. Let's get this filter installed, get water moving, and filtration going. The first thing to do is we're gonna get some ceramic rings, some biological media to put in our baskets. All right, I mentioned ceramic rings. This is what they look like. These came out of my 704Bs. But I just cleaned them up a little bit and we're gonna put them into the baskets here. All right, so the first thing we need to do is fill up our baskets with the correct media so that we can start assembling our filter. So we got 4 baskets. Each one has these little filter floss pads in. And to make this all easy, they're great mechanical filtration. So we're gonna keep them exactly where they are. And you still have like 1.5 inches at least to fill in these baskets with a different type of media. And a tried and true media is ceramic rings. And this is going to be a biological type filtration media where it literally is just a ring of ceramic and it's porous, so it has lots of surface area for beneficial bacteria to grow on. Beneficial bacteria is going to break down ammonia from the poop that's decaying in your tank and make it nitrite, and then more beneficial bacteria is going to break that down into nitrates, and then nitrates, for the most part, are going to start building up in your tank, and you're going to get rid of that by just doing water changes. So the goal of the filter really is to get rid of unsightly waste from your tank and make it into nitrates. These are very cheap ceramic rings off of Amazon, and I'll leave a link in the description. You can get nicer ones by Fluval that might be engineered a little better to have more surface area for that biological media. But I've had great success with just this cheap stuff because the Fluval stuff, that can add up pretty quick. One note here is you'll want to fill this completely to the brim with ceramic media, but you'll notice when you try to assemble your baskets, which kind of nest into each other, that will not fit because you need a little space for that flange to recess into the next basket. All right, so do a dry fit of each of your baskets just to make sure that they all line up and there's no gaps or anything, no ceramic media stopping it from sealing up. So one thing I figured out is you can't do all baskets at once. I mean, you can try to, but you're either gonna spill your ceramic media or things are gonna fall when you try to place it in here. So I just do one basket at a time. Oh, and then you get, oh, it's okay. And this is a really annoying complaint that I have, but these little handles are annoying because when you pull them up, now your ceramic media can kind of slide in there and stop you from pulling it down. So just make sure that when you put each of these baskets down, that this arm, the basket arm, is also all the way down. Otherwise you won't be able to assemble it correctly or you'll have leakage. All right, let's focus on the top of the filter here. So the first thing I want to start working on is our UV light. So you have the bulb. Be very careful with this. Don't try to grab the actual glass. Inspect it, just make sure it's not cracked. And what you're gonna do is kind of drop it in to the socket here, and then you're gonna push until it clicks. Hear that? Now it's clicked in, now it's in there, and that'll be good. Now this next part, you definitely don't wanna mess up. So you have these 2 O-rings on your crystal tube that's gonna protect your electricity going through your bulb here. So you're gonna lower that down. It's gonna kind of push into it. And then let me take it back out real quick. It's got these little tabs. What you wanna do is push it down far enough into the slot and then get the tab low enough that you can rotate it so it will hit a catch so you can't pull it out. And that will seal this whole space up to protect the bulb. So I now have it in there and it's now sealed. Give it a little pull to make sure it can't come out. Again, this is sealing from an electrical socket, so you do not want water getting in this. All right, last thing we want to install is this draining skep cover, they call it. And just, I mean, obviously you want to just line up the hole with the hole in your baskets. Make sure that those ceramic rings aren't pushing anything up, and it's sealed all the way around. Now we can install the cover. So you have your light with your crystal sleeve. Just make sure that's going into the hole that your baskets create. And just be very steady, be careful, that can break. So just go straight down. And then you'll find you need to put a little resistance on the top to activate the seal that goes around the perimeter of the top here. And then you got these 4 clips. You got 2 simple ones on the side, so I just clip those in. And you have this clamp with this extra metal piece to really grab on there, and just clip those. And you're all set. The cover is now installed. We can now focus on all the tubing mechanisms that go along with this filter. All right, so the next part is getting the tubing to the body of our filter, and it comes with 2 tubes, one for your intake, one for your output. Now these are pretty long, and if you want to cut them to length for a little more efficiency, you can do so. I plan on moving this filter around in the future, so I'm just gonna keep them full length. So this tubing is really stiff and kind of hard to work with, so I'm going to install the tubing to our adapter piece before I put it on the actual filter itself. And it's basically one big rib that you got to push the tube over to really create a good seal, which it is because this is a tight fit. And then you have an additional threaded coupler to ensure that it seats on there and can never come off. So just kind of work the tube in, coming at an angle. See, it's on there, but you got to push it past that ridge. There you go, past the ridge. Now, honestly, just push it as far as you can, and then screw down the connector piece. And that's on there, watertight. Take the other hose, do the same thing. All right, got that one on there too. All right, with your tubing installed, what you can do now is just note in out. You can look at this later, but it's got labels there, which is going to be great when you're setting this up. All right, to install your tubing onto your filter, this little adapter is kind of nifty. So it's got 2 locking mechanisms. It's got this middle one, which is also going to act as your valve to shut off any water going through these tubes, so that if you ever need to take this off, water doesn't just come flying out. And then you also got these little pins that you're going to put into slots. So it's going to go this way, where your in-out labels are towards the center of your filter. Have these locking mechanisms open, and just push down, get them in that locking mechanism, and you know that because you'll be able to close it, both sides, and then close the center. Now it's totally locked. To open it, obviously you do the reverse thing. Now your filter is ready to be put under your tank, and then you're going to bring your tubes to where you want them on the tank. All right, installing this filter down here, very straightforward like any other canister filter. I'm just gonna make sure the LCD screen is facing me. And I always like to have a nice trusty bin underneath my filter, because a lot of these filters, even the Fluval FX6, I'll have some leaking seals once in a while, and it usually only happens the first time I'm setting up the filter or the first time I turn it on after cleaning it. So it'll catch anything obvious before it gets to be too much. Always a good thing to have. And then what I'm going to do now is just snake my tubing to where I want the intake and output to be, remembering that it's labeled on your filter so you know which tube is going where. So just snake it over to where you need it. All right, so I have a glass canopy cover on this side with some cutouts, and then I have my Turtle Basker 5500 on this side. If you like what you see, check out my Etsy store. You can purchase this bad boy. Perfect for your turtle to come out of a full tank of water, bask away, and then get right back in. So I have a 75-gallon tank, so that's pretty thick trim here. So first thing I want to do before I put any tubing on there, just because it's kind of annoying, is unscrew these plastic screws so that this plate that's going to help hold this whole component to the side of your tank is totally out. I think that's the farthest it'll go. So you got to unscrew this like pretty much all the way and push it all the way back in order for it to fit on a 75-gallon tank trim. There you go. So that fits really well. So now what I want to do is install the green tubing. So with the spout here, you got 2 directionals, and you kind of have this ball valve nozzles here, so you can direct it how you want. Got 2 of those. No other option there. Kind of like the Fluval FX6. And you're just going to take your tube and you're going to slide it on over those O-rings. And now let's move over to the intake. Okay, so for the intake, we have the same component that we're going to install on the side, put the green tubing on. All right, for the intake portion, you got two options. You have that surface skimmer, or you have just a typical strainer on a straight rod here, and you got your suckers as well. So for first time setup, it says in the instructions not to use the surface skimmer. So install that after you get this thing running. Sure enough, I will follow those directions. So we're gonna go with just using your straight tube and your strainer. And that's simply taking your strainer, putting it onto the end there. Just make sure it's seated in there. And this is adjustable. You can see you can pull it out. That's great. The other 304 model, I didn't even mention that. You can't adjust this at all. It's just a straight tube. You either have to cut permanently or deal with it. And it's a pretty long tube. And then you also have your suckers. So put those on, hold this to the tank since it's so long. The turtles will have fun with this. And just install it to the bottom. Good job, buddy. There you go. Intake's installed. All right, the last step here, it says please in the instructions, so it sounds very important. And priming has been an issue with these types of filters in the past. So there's these little blue caps. So you got a screw off there and a cap here. Has a little O-ring, so it seals. But open that on both of these. All right, so one thing I noticed here is this is actually the outlet curved component, and this one's the inlet, and that's because there's this adjustable cap here that I was taking off for the blue one, but it doesn't have this regulator. But it doesn't matter for my instance because I'm gonna have this thing wide open, full throttle, and I guess that would just allow you to control how much is being blown out of the filter when you're running it. Now that you have those caps off, you basically have an open space to fill your tubing. That's what it says to do. Fill your green filter tubing so that there's no air in it. And it sounds like that's critical for priming, and that's actually something you had to do on the old filters as well. All right, almost. See that air pocket in there? Can't have that. All right, don't forget to reinstall your caps once you have your tubes full of water. And let's try again. All right, we got movement. It's got to purge probably some air left in the filter, even though it feels like I put all that effort in already. All right, holding down that button for 3 seconds. And hit the up button. All right, 2, 3. We're going to full throttle. Keep going. Level 6. All right, you can hear it now. Let's go check it out. There we go. That's solid flow. Okay, much better. It's not a lot of room to play with to lower this down. So you got to keep your tank pretty full if you don't want a lot of noise. Okay, so for the skimmer, you basically have this elbow, and you have the skimmer itself with this rising and lowering tube here with a little skimmer teeth. And this is a float valve, so it should move up and down on its own. And obviously this is going to be your intake now. And to do this, we're just going to take that strainer off the bottom. So this strainer, it's got to go, and you're going to replace it with the elbow. Take where that elbow was, and you're going to install that. All right, with the float valve, you just basically want to make sure it's not going so high that it's coming out, even though it has this little blue tab that's going to keep it from floating away. So there you go. Skimmer's working. Filter's installed. Let's put everything back together. And that's it. The HW-3000 is installed in my 75-gallon aquarium. I love the LCD panel there. It makes it look all futuristic with this. I got it on level 6 power, full power. You can see the timer left for the that UV bulb in there. This thing has a UV sterilizer, which is pretty cool. It's got that surface skimmer, which is pretty awesome. And it just pumps out a lot of water through a pretty decent stack of filter media trays, almost 800 gallons per hour. That's amazing for a $130 filter. It's not leaking, it's quiet, and it seems built well enough. My huge complaint here is getting the tubes full of water. This is claimed to be self-priming, but your self-priming is me fiddling with like a chemistry set, trying to get water in one tube, bend it out, get the air out of the bends, and do the other one. And that was hugely frustrating. It took me quite a while to actually get this filter started. So know that going into it. Hopefully me telling you now will help you with that frustration. Other than that though, thanks for watching this video. I hope it helps you choose whether or not this filter is right for you, or it just helps you set it up in general. Until next time, long live your turtle.